My name is Wen-Yu. I grew up in Thailand. I'm from Taiwan. I would like to take a moment here and ask you to think about something. What comes to your mind when I say the word activism? Maybe you think of a kind of menacing, mysterious individual, like the one here. Looks like a wannabe, right? Maybe you think of a group of similar individuals, loud, rowdy, carrying these aggressive placards, protesting outside some kind of government building. And you're not wrong, because that is the perception of activism from a lot of people. And as an activist myself, I have to confront many common perceptions, now not necessarily wrong, perhaps missing something at the end of the day. So for example, people think activism is inherently confrontational. Look at this guy being wrestled to the ground by the policeman. Why would I want to do that, you might think to yourself, when I can stay home and video game the entire day? You might think that activism is just incomprehensible. Remember those weird animal rights activists you walk by on the street, protesting with their costumes? You don't really understand them. They're distant from you. That's another problem. Or maybe you're more of a positive person. Activism is something inspirational, is standing up for the weak, is protecting communities and protecting people's rights. But the problem with being inspired all the time is that sometimes you don't aspire to be those people. Malala is great, Nelson Mandela is great, but they're like the superhero types, right? I'm not, I'm just a normal teenager. That's what I thought not so long ago. It's not unsurprising that activism means different things to different people in different contexts, and that's because the only thing that activism defines is the act of carrying out certain actions or certain behaviors with the goal of trying to promote social change. And therefore, people never agree on what kind of social change is good. People don't agree on when the legitimate means or ends of activism is carried out. People will never agree. But I'm here to tell you that there is a unifying theme about being an activist, and that is a person embracing himself or herself as an agent of social change. And that, regardless of how you do it, when you do it, and why you do it, is something powerful. And I think it's something that is good, and it's something we should discuss more in schools. So let me tell you a little story. I'm going to talk about myself, not because I'm significant in any ways, but because it's a story I know best. And let me show you what activism has done for me. I'm from Taiwan. It's a little island in East Asia. In the last few decades, it has transformed magnificently through economic growth and going from a dictatorship to a relatively successful democracy. It is a pioneer in many things, like electronics. But yet at the same time, despite the fact of all the evolution that happened, my grandparents and my parents will still say to me from a young age, politics is dirty. Do not get involved in it. And the connotation with that is that political activism is therefore also dirty. So for me, my future lied in pursuing these objective, uncontroversial subjects like maths, like sciences, like languages. So I moved to Thailand at a young age. When I was ready, when I applied to university, I applied to one of the top universities to study science. To be precise, biomedical science. Why? Because I wanted to help people. And I thought, what could be a better way than doing medicine, right? I also think I'm not really good at anything except science, so it makes sense, right? My parents is like, we want you to be a doctor. I'm like, okay, then everything falls into place. And I thought, I like science. I like the idea of medicine because it's so not controversial. It's so objective. I like the security of having a right and a wrong. But I was naive because as I started to study biomedical science, I realized there's certain things I need to know if I want to translate my skills for the society. For example, I should probably know how doctors are compensated. I should probably know how research is funded. I should probably know how inequality and poverty affects the health of people that are marginalized by society. I should probably know how environmental degradation and climate change dramatically change the epidemiology of diseases. I should probably know that in certain countries like Thailand, the legal system prevents access and quality of healthcare for many people who need it. And for all these reasons, I started to think, I just can't be only a scientist anymore. I needed to look into these issues. And therefore, for the next few years, I spent a lot of time, campaigning for social issues. At first, I was just thinking, I'll look into social issues that affect the fundamentals of health. But that definition expanded so quickly. I started looking at human rights, and then I looked at gender inequality, then I look at social justice, then climate change. These things are interconnected, and I realized how naive I was. And so, let me talk about a few things that I learned in this journey. First of all, schools like to tell you that we believe critical thinking and citizenship is important. I know this because I was a teacher in London. I taught chemistry. But do we really believe this is true? Because despite all we seem to claim that we want to teach you the scientific method, that we want to teach you the interpretation and justifications for historical events and political ideas, I know for a fact from teaching that young people are not empowered to have a political opinion. They're not empowered especially to realize the power of their opinion. And how is this true? Because when you teach politics, oftentimes in many places, and I can't generalize, but in many, many places, you're taught a model answer. You're taught there are two sides, and only two sides of a story. You take a few things from the A column, you take a few things from the B column, you put that into an exam, you come to some kind of conclusion. That's a model exam answer. Classrooms exist to prevent confrontation, to prevent disagreement, for a good reason. Teachers don't want you to argue all the time. But society is full of disagreements and confrontation, so we're not preparing young people for that. I wanted to rectify this, and the first thing I did was to teach debating. It was a hobby of mine when I wanted to become a better activist, to see the other side of things. But debating is not enough. Just like writing political ideas in a blackboard is not gonna allow you to see the other side of the issue, but also just talking about something on the purely intellectual level is easy, because you don't have to face the gravity and reality of issues that people face on the ground. So I encourage my students to take action. And one of the things about activism is that it promotes critical thinking and citizenships. It makes these ideas tangible, because you really know how it's like when you go out there and talk to people whose issues you're fighting for. The second thing is vulnerability. A word we all hate. Nobody likes being vulnerable. But being vulnerable can be a good thing. And one of the problems with activism is that it puts you in a position where you will almost always be vulnerable. Why? Activism is not just coming to a decision about an idea. An activist, by definition, goes out and carries out an action because of what they believe. And therefore, they're almost guaranteed to face opposition in society. As a teacher, I struggle to think the number of times I ask my students to give me an opinion that I know will guarantee opposition when they say it in a classroom. We tell them to give us the right answer. If they give us a wrong answer, we correct them nicely and gently. We don't always prepare them for confrontation. But vulnerability helps us grow, because it makes you more confident. It makes you realize that disagreement is just part of everyday life. Let's talk about something the opposite of vulnerability, perhaps: trust and camaraderie. I'm not that much older than you, but I can tell that from everything I experienced in life so far, I've rarely come across the kind of trust and camaraderie that I experienced in activism. This is a picture from the Sunflower Movement. You might not have heard of it. You may have heard of the umbrella movement in Hong Kong. This is something similar. Last year, in March, thousands of Taiwanese students and young people stormed into the Taiwanese parliament to protest a certain government action. Now, we can disagree, we will, and the society will continue to disagree over whether their actions were good or bad. But I choose to look at how inspiring their actions were. Thousands of people stormed into parliament and lived there for 3 weeks in protest of something they believed that was wrong. They didn't know each other. There was no leader at first. They organized these organic little groups, people to go around and clean, people to go and translate so international media will know what's going on, people who will put videos on YouTube, people who will look out for security. They did this for 3 weeks, sleeping in the parliament and outside parliament, where there were supporters as well, knowing that any minute the policeman can come in and violently evict them. Yet they can do that. They can trust each other in times of stress and times of difficulty. And this was inspiring for me. And coincidentally, around a year later, at the London School of Economics, where I was studying, there was another occupation. And this time, I was ready, and I was there as well. And again, the media tells us the young people are violent, young people are aggressive, they're rash, they're irrational. They like to take direct actions instead of thinking about their consequences. But again, I'd like to focus on the story behind it. All these people, many of them do not know each other. They slept in their rooms, on their coats, sharing blankets. It was amazing. And in the end, a few weeks ago, or a week ago, the London School of Economics Administration gave in to one of the demands, and that was stopping to invest their funds in fossil fuels. And one of the main reasons for that was because of this. Young people coming into a room, not knowing each other, staying there for a long time, trusting each other, having each other's back. That's something you don't always learn in times of difficulty. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is something that you don't always think of, is that activism gives you an amazing academic advantage. And I know this because it did for me. Because I never graduated from high school. I got into university by taking the exams directly. It was difficult for me to think that I would get into a master's degree in the world, like somewhat pretty good. I ended up going to Oxford to study something I was passionate about, and that's environmental policy, despite never having graduated from high school, despite not having the highest GPA from university. And the reason was because, I don't really know this, but I will hypothesize that in my personal statement, the passion for what I do for campaigning came through. And this is one of the great things about activism. It gives you a sense of purpose, so you're no longer just learning about things in abstract. It gives you the confidence to say what you believe in, and university admission officers and university departments can tell. So I got into Oxford, I got into LSE, and I never thought it was my grades. I always think it's what I did outside the classroom. Eventually, society is always in a constant state of change, which is pretty funny, that sentence, if you think about it. Society will always change and there will always be disagreements. The only thing we can do is to prepare young people to be able to discuss change and to be able to understand change. And that's why we can have an optimistic look on these disagreements instead of avoiding them in the classroom, like my teachers did for me and like I used to do for my own students. And we know education must change. How do we know that? Code.org is an organization based in the United States. They have people like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates coming out to say we need to teach coding because it's relevant to life now, because we need it in the future. We have people saying we need to teach Mandarin because the Chinese economy is on the rise, and therefore Mandarin will be relevant for future. The UK government is now discussing whether or not we should teach a subject called home economics, which includes things, for example, like cooking, because cooking helps your future health. These are all trends in education where we realize we need to make things more relevant for young people. One of the things I believe today is that activism will always be relevant for young people because you build the ability to trust others in times of difficulty. You understand the power of teamwork. You understand that vulnerability is a useful concept. You also understand critical thinking and citizenship in much more tangible ways. In the end, I would like to wrap up my speech by asking you to think about something. Go out there and pursue a social cause that you believe in. And think of it this way. It's not because the social cause needs you in order to go forward. It's because you need a social cause in order to go forward. Thank you for having me.